What is going on, guys? This is Gene Jensen, and in this video what I want to do is I want to talk about all the little details that I have learned over 25 years of fishing the Fluke. Some of these might surprise you, so stay tuned. All right, so to start off with, let's talk about rods and reels. You've got two options: spinning, baitcaster. I fish a baitcaster because I've really practiced throwing really light baits, and I love a baitcaster because I can skip it well, I'm more accurate with it, and I can get more cast during the day. But spinning rods are just as good, but I always go with a medium power spinning rod. So a medium fast action spinning rod, and that's what this one is. This is an Omen Black. And then I've got a medium. This has got a Ned rig on it right now, but this is the new Fate Black, and it's a medium, 7 foot. This one's a 7.3, and this I think is a 7.1. Nope, it's a 7.3. So they're exactly the same rod. Those are the rods that I use. I need to turn this boat. Give me just a second, guys. All right, that's better. I don't have my power pole, so I can't anchor down. I'm just kind of sitting in a pocket, and the sun's coming up, and I'm trying to race it. We may end up pausing this and going the other side. But anyway, talking about the line, or we've just finished talking about the rods, let's talk about the line. I always use fluorocarbon. You've got to get as much sink as you possibly can out of what you're using, and it's a weightless, kind of a weightless technique. And so you want a line that sinks, and so at least make your leader fluorocarbon. And so I'm using fluorocarbon line. You can use braid to a fluorocarbon leader and stuff like that, but I always put a swivel, a barrel swivel. Let's see if I can get that to focus on that. There we go. I always put a barrel swivel on my line, usually a size 5 or a little bit bigger. And just something with this, that barrel swivel is going to give it a little bit of weight to get it down a little bit. And then what it's going to do is it's going to reduce your line twist. It's going to basically eliminate your line twist. Is what you're going to get a lot when you're jerking a fluke around, is you're going to get a lot of line twist, because it's going to jerk and pause, or jerk and go back and forth, and it'll spin and do all kinds of fun stuff. All right, so let's talk about the hooks. Okay, there's two different style of hooks that I use, or two different types of hooks that I use. I've always used a 4 or 5/0 Gamakatsu offset round bend, which is what this is right here. Okay, it's got the offset and then a round bend hook, and I've always used that one, and it works great. Only problem is, in a kayak, this is kind of a little bit of beefy hook for a medium rod, and it's harder to set the hook on this. I've got it tied on today because I'm pre-fishing, and I don't want to hook the fish, so I'm going to give myself any possibility, or try to eliminate the possibility of hooking a fish, so I've got a heavier hook. When I'm in a kayak, I use the EWG. It's a G-Finesse EWG hook, and it's got a lighter wire, but it's still really stiff. What they coat it with causes it to be a lot stiffer for the wire width, and it's a lot easier to get a hook set. So this is the one I use when I'm in a kayak. 3, 4, 5/0 for this one. I kind of like a 4/0 just because you get a little bit more action out of the tail, and that's just me being picky. But those are the two hooks. Those are the ones I recommend. Those are the ones I will always recommend, because I mean, I've been using this one for 15 years, and then this one just came out last year, and it is dynamite for kayak fishing. And I always try to steer people that are kayak fishing towards G-Finesse hooks, just because they're always you get better hook sets. All right, stay with me now. The success of a fluke are in the details, and it's really important that you understand how to hook that fluke. We're going to use the EWG, but everything is exactly the same with the, or not the EWG, we're going to use the round bend, but everything is the same with the EWG. Okay, so first of all, make sure I get a nice straight fluke. And you have got to keep the hook in the center line of that bait. And another rule is you got to keep the eye of the hook out of the bait. So we're going to go, and the best way to do it at first is to lay that hook alongside the bait, okay? Lay that hook right alongside the bait like that. See where it's going to go in, at what angle, and everything else, and where it's got to come out right here in order to keep the eye of that hook out of there. And it's not much, okay? So I'm going to go in at a slight angle because of the type of hook I'm using. EWG, you don't have to go at an angle. I'm going to come out And I'm just gonna basically just Texas rig it. So see how the eye of that hook is right there. Now, lay it alongside. I want to see what angle everything else is going to go in, and I want that tip of that hook to be just barely on the underneath the skin. So I go down to that spot, and I'm very careful, and I've done this a lot of times, but you really want that hook to go dead center line and then come right out just like this. And so it's straight down the center. Where you put the hook in at the tip is straight down the center. Everything is centered, and it keeps that fluke perfectly straight. I can't overemphasize how important this is to get a perfect running fluke, and you're going to get a better action. You're going to get more back and forth action, which is what you need. It's a jerk bait. Jerk baits go back and forth. Fish love that action. So if you hook it wrong, you'll notice that it will dart to one side or the other way, but only to one side. And so you really have to make sure. And if you mess up, you can tuck it back in there and bring it back out, but you've got to make sure that it's center, just like that. Okay. All right, so let's talk about adding weight, because a lot of people will add nail weights to their flukes, and I do under one circumstance. Right now, shad spawn, the bass are super shallow. I've got to skip it up underneath stuff, under docks, and skip it underneath trees and stuff like that. And I can cover a lot of water faster because it sinks a little bit faster. This is when I use it. Okay, if I'm trying to fish, other ways, I typically will not weight it, but I'm going to weight it here. So this is a nail weight. Okay, you guys see that really good? It's got a little pointy end, and it's got a little flat end on the other side. This one's tungsten. They come in lead, and I use lead as well, but this is the smallest one in tungsten that I can find, and I can't remember who makes this. I've had them for a long time, but that's the smallest one I can find. I cut it in half, or about in half. So I cut about that much of it off, and I just want this small one. Because it's not where I put a weight in a fluke, it's not going to fit if it's any longer than this right here. So I get that nail weight. Let me put the long one back up. And I have to cut them with some small little tiny bolt cutters that I have. So, all right, so before I even put the hook in the fluke, and I went ahead and pulled this one out, I want this sinker to go right there, but at an angle. You'll see the angle here in just a second. It's going to be kind of like that. Okay, so I don't want it to come out in the slit. I want it to go across the head, and I'm going to show you how I get that done. The first thing I do is I take the point of the hook. Okay, let's see if I can get this right. I put it right there, and I try to go straight as I can into the center line of that fluke, and I go straight towards. So I went in at this angle right here. Okay. And I pull it out, and I just made a pilot hole for my sinker. Okay, somebody's texting me. Dadgummit. So I just made a pilot hole. So I find that pilot hole. I go in at that exact same angle, and I push that sinker until it disappears, and then I just kind of squeeze it and push it together. So with the pilot hole, it keeps that weight center line. Again, it's very, very important. So I made that pilot hole with the hook, and then I hooked the fluke. Okay, I'm just gonna do this real quick. And that adds a little bit of weight, but doesn't destroy the action of the bait. Now you can add a little bit in the tail. Some people add them in the tail and makes them to back up underneath docks and things like that. I don't typically do that. You jerk one hard enough and around enough, you'll get a fish to come out from underneath the dock, and you can make it spin and go underneath docks too with a little bit of practice. Okay, so look here. You see that bend in the back? It isn't much of a bend, but that'll make it spin. That won't. So you always want the back to be straight, going in and turn the tail just like this. Now, this is very anal retentive, and I know, and it's as OCD as it can get, but I've put a lot of time into flukes over the years, and the more perfect you can make it, the better action you get. and the more different ways that you can fish it. So with it rigged like this, the two ways you can fish it, or the ways that I love to fish it, is it's the jerk pause as fast as you can. You'll see me do that in a minute. And the other way is just to cast it out and slowly retrieve, and it'll do this number. Okay, if it's hooked wrong, it'll do this number, and it looks horrible. So anyway, that's how you rig it. I got fish schooling up on this point here just a minute. We're going to show you how to fish it. So anyway, let's get out of the water. All right, so let's talk about the classic style of fishing a fluke, which is the jerk pause. Okay, so I'm gonna throw it out and I'm gonna jerk and pause, and when I'm fishing like the shad spawn and the bass are super shallow and I've got a weight on it like I've got, this is how I fish it, super fast, and it gets reaction strikes. So right now what's going on in this lake, and I'm gonna fish the tournament tomorrow, and this is how I'm gonna catch them, is I'm going to cruise the bank and the fish are hanging out along the laydowns and things like that, and they're eating shad as they swim by early in the morning during the shad spawn, and then they move out to these points. But I cast out and literally pop pause, pause, and I'm just ripping it. And when it's hooked wrong and you're doing this, it's spinning and it's going in the wrong direction, or all in the same direction, things like that, and you're not getting that erratic action that you need to catch a fish. All right, so I had to move around and get a good sun angle because the sun is bright this morning. Anyway, so as you guys see me cast this weightless fluke with a bait caster, I'm gonna link to an old video where I explained how I cast light stuff on a bait caster. But anyway, so I'm running the bank. I'm doing the old jerk pause and jerk pause, and when they set when you see a fish bite, I can see this bait the whole way with a good pair of polarized sunglasses. I can see the bait the whole way, and what happens is a fish will come out and they'll grab your bait and you'll see it and you'll set the hook instantly and you'll jerk the bait away from them. It's like topwater. If you can see the bait, if you can see the fish take the bait, you've got to give them a second or two, or a couple of seconds before you set the hook, or you're just going to set it too fast and you're going to lose the fish. And so that's something that took me a long time to figure out. I just like, oh yeah, there's a fish, boom, and there he goes, swims away. But anyway, so I'm working it around, working it through cover, and where a fluke really shines is coming through cover. If you've got that thing hooked right, if you've got the hook just barely buried underneath there, you don't need to be afraid of getting snagged too much in this kind of stuff. Okay, and so I'm working it around. Now, another way to fish it, like I said, is basically a slow roll. You cast it out and you just slowly roll it back, and it just kind of swims. It doesn't have any action. Okay, and if you take that hook and flip it upside down in that bait, it'll start to go just like this, and it'll go just a little bit back and forth, not a whole lot of action. And I do that when the bass are not very active. Okay, so that's the two ways I fish it. All right, so one thing I forgot to cover was leader length. Okay, this is about a 14-inch leader. Okay, I like them 12 to 18 inches, sometimes 20 inches. Just harder to cast the longer you get, but depends on just how much action I want to get out of the fluke. The closer it is to the hook, the less action you're going to get out of the fluke. The more that sinker's going to pull that fluke away from its glide before the earlier, or the closer it is, the earlier it's going to pull that fluke away from its glide side to side. And so most of the time I don't want that, so I want at least a 14-inch leader. 18 inches ideal. I've just retied a few times, so, but that's definitely how I want to do it. So that's leader. I'm trying to think of anything else I've forgotten. Color, JJ's Magic on this sucker. Dip the tail in chartreuse. If you got a little bit of dingy water during the spawn, or the shad spawn, throw a little red on there, a little JJ's Magic red dye, and it really enhances it a lot of times, especially if you got super clear water. You want to add a little bit of color, a little bit of blue on the top. I've got a bunch of different colors and stuff that I do for flukes to make them look like all kinds of different bait fish. So now, as you're doing the old jerk pause, play around
with the length of the fall, or the amount of time you allow it to fall. So like this morning, I figured out, I caught a couple of spotted bass this morning. I figured out that they wanted it falling a little bit longer than I normally do when I'm running the bank like this. Okay, so I pop, pause, pop, pause, you know, that kind of stuff. But I normally pop, pause, and I just keep on going, because you'll see the fish coming out of the cover and you want to keep them interested. If you just let it pause and they start to swim away, you pop it a few more times. You just watch the fish, watch their reaction. You can figure out how long you need to pause it, okay? Another thing a fluke is really good for is skipping. Once you get that low trajectory down with your spinning rod or bait caster or whatever it is, you'll be able to skip it quite well. It just takes a lot of practice, but just nice low trajectory, and it skips right in there just like that. And the reason I use a bait caster over a spinning rod is that I am a lot more accurate with a bait caster than I am with a spinning rod, and I can make more casts. Look at it come through that tree. I can make more casts better and a lot more accurate than I can with a spinning rod. I wish you guys could see how this thing jerks back and forth when it's rigged right. It really does. I mean, just 12 inches one way or the other. And the way you jerk it is it's, a lot of people want to jerk and stop their rod, and you're jerking it like this, which it can work, but you've got to give that bait some slack in order for it to have a chance to swing side to side. So you jerk it, it's like tapping a drum. You go tap, 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 and you don't leave the drumstick on the drum, you actually take it off the drum, or it deadens the sound. And so same thing, it's pop, pop, and I'm giving the bait line. Every time I pop it, I give the line back to the bait, and it'll really give you a better action. Harder to do when you're doing it fast, but I always make sure on that pause, I want to give it as much action as I can by giving it the line back. So when is the best time to fish a fluke? I talked about it a little bit earlier with you know, bass, with shad spawns and bluegill spawns and any kind of bait fish, blueback herring, that kind of stuff. Yes, it's critical. But if you're on a fish where they love to school, or you're on a lake where they love to school a lot, where they love to come up and bust bait fish out in the middle, always have one tied on. So what I'm doing right here is I'm going to pull out here to this point. Now what has happened is overnight the lake level has dropped at least 9 inches, maybe a whole foot. And all the fish that were shallow yesterday are pulling out, or have pulled out. This is a deep water reservoir, so they're not going to go far, because deep water is really, really close. I'm sitting in 8 feet of water right now. It's like 100 feet right out in front of me. So they're not going to go far, but they're going to pull out onto these points. And you pull out here and you start seeing them schooling, you have that thing ready and it'll catch a fish, I promise. It just looks like a bait fish fleeing, just like all the other ones are, and just looks a little bit different. And that's what you're looking for.
We're gonna call that one a good one. I'm telling you guys, the details in a fluke really do make that difference. I can't overemphasize that. You really got to make sure everything is straight and everything else. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out my tournament video that I'm going to film tomorrow, hopefully, and hopefully do pretty good in the tournament. But like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out of the water. Go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. I'm going to take this hoodie off. I'm sweating to death. Anyway, see ya.